Trainee Think, episode 3. We're back. First two episodes have went down a treat. Got lots of great comments of everybody. Everyone's enjoying it. Been over the fundamentals of training and nutrition. So again, just right off the bat, we appreciate all the support that we're getting of everybody, and we're going to keep these coming for you. But today, episode 3, we're talking about fat loss. Everyone's favorite topic. How do we get lean? Tips and tricks, pitfalls to avoid, and especially with summer, which is just on the horizon, coming around the corner. And again, you'll probably agree, mate. I think taking people through diet phases is probably one of the most sought after requests that we get when people come to us. There's a lot of pitfalls and mistakes that people make. There's things that you should do that are going to benefit you, and we want to get into the weeds of a fat loss phase, don't we?
Absolutely buzzing to get into this one, and just to echo as well, thank you to everyone. Had lots of messages, lots of comments as well, and we're stacking up the views. So thanks for everyone who's watching, coming back, and hopefully, as Francis has just said, we're going to talk about cutting, fat loss, in this session, and hopefully some real gold that you guys can take and move forward with.
And this is fresh in the mind for the both of us right now, mate. Especially with you right at the end of your diet phase and getting very lean. I'm 6 weeks into prep, so we're right in the heart of it ourselves. Got loads of clients doing the exact same thing. So yeah, we're in the best possible position, mate, to try and share some tips and tricks and to help people not sort of mess up the fat loss phase.
I think what's really good as well that we can touch on and we'll get into, you've just sort of come through, Francis, that first, we spoke about it on the spaces before, the first few weeks where it's maybe not seeing the change that you want and getting that, what am I actually doing? And linking into some of the mistakes that people will make where it's like, it's not happening fast enough. You're not trusting in the process. I know yourself, you've been round, that fat loss and into, a muscle improvement phase multiple times over the years. But it's something that we can touch on. Obviously, I'm at the kind of the business end, so to speak.
Yep.
I'm going to push to the end of the month. I don't know if we'll get into it, but we can mention, I've had a little play with peaking the look of where I'm at. So I've been doing some refeeds as well. So that'll feed into some of the things that we'll probably cover over the course of tonight. And I'm buzzing to get into it. Buzzing.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, but I think it's, again, as we spoke about with nutrition and fat loss, they go hand in hand. There's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of, again, bullshit and just rabbit holes that people go down with fat loss phases. So I want to clear up a lot of the nonsense with that. So I think we start off from the sort of get-go with a fat loss phase. Like who should be going for a fat loss phase? What markers are we looking at? Are we looking at body fat percentage? Are we looking at photos? Again, the other way to look at it as well is someone just being a little bit too impatient to pull the trigger on a diet phase. Let's say someone's been into an improvement season or a gaining phase they're in the middle of it 4 or 5 months, but because they feel maybe a little bit softer, do they need to cut? So I think there's multiple different lenses on how we can attack it. Who should cut? Who's ready for a cut? What are some of the metrics that you're looking for with someone?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic point that you make. Different people will be at different parts of their journeys. And one of the things that we often stress is we need to get a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think one of the pitfalls that comes, and I know we're not going to touch too much on improvement phases here, but one of the ways that you'll stay stuck is this constant cycle of an 8-week, let's call it a bulk. I like call it an improvement phase, but let's call it a bulk. And then it's a 6-week cut straight off the back of that. You'll just sort of get going into, you should, if you're doing it right, you just sort of get going into your improvement phase, into to getting stronger, to getting bigger, to growing, using the calories that you actually need to get the tissue on, the strength in your training, the recovery. And then you're too quick to go back into this, I'm getting a little soft. Now done right, nobody's saying that you need to go and put on 5 stone, for example. But similarly, you're not going to make much progress if you're only putting on just a couple of pounds. You're going to see that again in your pictures. We've spoken often about when we're building strength and the improvement phases. It's then that strength and that size that we want to keep when it comes to the cut. So that range of how we do it is as important in the improvement phases as in the cut. And if we're talking about someone that's come off the back of, I know that you're a fan as well, as I am, Francis, that we do that length and longevity in your improvement phase, which means you don't get too bulky or put on too much body fat too quickly. So it all comes down to that rate and adherence and doing a lot of things well that comes from a good start point, cut into a transition into a muscle improvement phase, and then going back out. You know, you want to have that patience and say, it's not just time because you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable. There will be clear markers. Maybe your abs have totally smoothed out a little bit. And that's where you should probably start looking. So it's going to be for me, predominantly, it's always photos, but you can use body fat percentages if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with the best improvement phases, they start from the best possible position anyway. So that likelihood of, you know, you feel like you're getting fat or you're getting smoother, you know, too fast, too quickly. If you start from the best possible position, the likelihood of that happening, it diminishes. But I definitely like taking photos. I think photos are one of the best measurements to see exactly where you're at. Body fat percentages alone, I don't think they're accurate enough, because there is people who would distribute body fat differently, you know, from the torso, you know, glutes and hips. Again, I know myself, I can store a lot of body fat, you know, maybe around the hips, and upper body might look a little bit leaner. So in terms of just looking at photos or just body fat percentage alone, I like to try and tie everything together. But I think if you are looking at a range for most people, you know, most fellas, you know, once you start probably approaching that 20% body fat range, you're probably going to oscillate. Let's say you finish a good cut and you're around that 10% range, right? Just as an example, if you're around 10%, you're probably going to oscillate slowly up to that 18 to 20% range, very, very slowly, pushing your body weight up, progressing your lifts. And once you start getting to that sort of north end of that range, you're around that 20%, that's probably going to be a decent time to, you know, pull the trigger on a little bit of a cut phase. But if you've done that improvement season right, that's going to take 9, 10, 11 months to go from 10% body fat and slowly keep things up. That will take a long time. So that's where you start from a good position, you get those ratios right. You're not going to be trying to be too trigger happy on getting into a cut phase. So I think that goes hand in hand with, you know, someone who's looking, should I cut? Am I in a position to cut? Well, I think if you are close to that 20% body fat, and, you know, you're looking at your photos, there's just no vascularity, there's no separation anywhere, I think you're probably in a good spot to go into a cut phase looking at those markers. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And what I really like what you've done there, Francis, is you've talked about ranges. I think it's very, very difficult. You've mentioned body fat distribution as well. Using myself as an example, my front or my upper, is normally ready maybe as much as 9 weeks before my lower half is. So you're only as lean then as your leanest body part. So you could quote a number just by taking a picture of the upper and saying I'm X%. Well, that's not technically true, because like yourself, I carry on different body parts as well. Mine predominantly my glutes and my hamstrings is where I carry most. So I think it's important to introduce a range, because then you can account for different people looking slightly different at different percentages, depending on, for example, how much muscle mass that they actually carry. Because I think for me, using a strict body fat percentage, you could have two people, even using a bodybuilding stage as an example, one person could technically be leaner than the other, but they still look different.
Yeah.
Different size, bellies, insertions. There's a whole list of things that you could go into. But the point being, body fat looks different on different people. And I think using that as a sole metric, you know, you touched on pictures and stuff like that, something that's very, you know, it's a necessity for us in the space when we're online and we don't always see people face to face. We need those pictures in the same lighting, in the same conditions each week. You know, we need it fasted for a reason, so that you've got the same environment. Because if you take it in the gym and it's pumped and it's full of water and stuff like that, it looks totally different from what it would look like when you're taking your pictures just fasted in the morning. And that's the same conditions that you're looking for week on week.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, the check-in photos are a very important part of the process. I get weekly check-in photos from my coach fasted every Tuesday morning. That's my check-in day. Every Tuesday out, get the photos in the same position, and it allows you to have objective measurements, doesn't it? I think that's very important with it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's paramount. I mean, you've got the same factors there. That's what you're looking at, and you're comparing then like for like. So what would you do when you're transitioning someone into a cut? How would you break it down? Do you start to pull calories down, for example, or maybe if someone's coming from an improvement phase, do you get them to maybe tidy up because they're a little bit comfortable? I know myself, if I'm in that phase, there's a wee biscuit or two in there with the tea. Let's tidy up, keep calories as high as we can. How do you approach it?
Yeah, so I think if someone was coming to me, it will be slightly different if someone is coming from, if you've worked with someone through a gaining phase and then you're going into a deficit, that's different than, let's say, someone is just coming to you fresh out the gate, you've never worked with them, and you just want to drop some body fat. I think initially, mate, I think it's always going to come for me from a drop from calories. I always assume that baseline expenditure, or we get that into a decent spot, whether that be step counts of 8,000 a day, 10,000, 12,000, whatever, with a little bit of cardio in there as well, if someone needs it. But the big lever that we're always going to pull on is going to be a nice little drop in calories. So let's say someone has been, into a surplus phase, you just finish an improvement phase. I think a safe bet is pulling, maybe 20% of calories down as an example from where you might have been. Maybe a little bit more if someone's got a little bit more body fat on them. But I like to get someone into a decent deficit, not too conservative where we're not going to see much changes, but not too aggressive that we're going to risk any sort of muscle or performance loss. So what I tend to see a decent range for a lot of people. Again, I like to work on ranges just so you don't give someone, look, you have to drop 1 pound a week or shit or bust. I like anywhere from like 0.5% to 1% of body weight coming off per week in that range. Someone might be higher on the end of that if they've got more body fat to lose. Someone might be a little bit on the lower end of that, if they are getting closer to being leaner. And you might even creep lower than that, once someone is starting to get, sub 10% as an example. But most people who are going to be listening to this have got no interest in sort of getting stage lean. So yeah, in that range of 0.5 to 1% of body weight coming off per week.
Yeah, so basically what you've said there is there's no crash dieting because we're going to support performance. And that's one thing, we see often when people start that cutting phase. It's like, how quickly can I get to a weight? Which really, to be honest, that weight means nothing. I mean, you could pull, 12, 14, 18 pounds off someone in a week if you just pulled out, let's say carbs, just pull out carbs and just eat protein and a little bit of fats and watch the scales absolutely plummet. But what happens as a result of that? And again, you touched on it, we're supporting performance. We don't want to lose that. If someone spent a lot of time, money, effort in the phase that they're building muscle, you want to fight basically for every ounce of that. Now, will we keep absolutely every single strand? We'd be liars if we said yes, but we're going to fight for it and we're going to try to do it. And I think that thinking comes as well about instilling that into people from the very start of the cut to say, listen, this is a process, the same as your improvement phase was. If it's something you're working with in an improvement phase, we're going to stagger up. Same way, we're going to stagger down here. We're not looking for dramatic drops in scales. Actually, quite the opposite. We're looking for steady, or we're looking for feedback from photos because, again, some people will, a little bit slower on the scales, but if you can see that there's visible change and people can feed back to you as well, my clothes feel better, I'm still getting stronger in the gym, I'm fighting for that performance. And what you're doing then is you're protecting the longevity of the cut so that it doesn't need things like a deload in the middle of it. We wouldn't want that. Yes, we've got things in the bank where we've got diet breaks and refeeds if it's needed based on the individual basis or whatever they're facing. But again, we'd probably, I don't know if you would agree with this, Francis, prefer like a linear type path so that you've got someone, you're working well with them, you're understanding them, you're supporting them through their journey. And it then means that there's a consistency in it, and by that I mean a consistency of their body responding. So you might not need to make as many, and certainly not any drastic changes, but you're just seeing that nice. The only thing we can't control are the actual scales themselves. So if everyone's doing something right, they've got their cardio in nice, they're doing the nutrition, and they're training nice and hard, we're going to have that. We're going to see that trend over time.
It's funny you should mention this, though, mate, because the exact same thing, it's happened to me over the last 7 days, right? The scale didn't budge at all, right? Now, let me lay the context in this, because it's very important, because if I'm going through it, think about it. I'm going to try and step on stage. This can happen to anyone as well. I've been working with my coach since last January, so you're talking 15, 16 months. So we know each other well. We get on very well. We're 5 weeks into prep, 6 weeks this week. So last week, the first 4 or 5 weeks of the diet phase, scale weight was coming off good rate, 0.7 to 1% coming off weekly. Spot on. All of a sudden, the last week, it didn't move at all. The average stayed exactly the same for the week. It did not budge. But the visuals, it was the leanest that I've looked. Now, how do we know that? Because we take consistent check-in photos every week. I've got 15, 16 months of check-ins with my coach. And as soon as the check-in come through, he said, look, this is the best that you've looked. Like, this is the leanest that you've looked, even though the scale hasn't moved. So there you go. That's what we're saying. It's not just about your fat loss phase, or the cut is not always dictated just by a scale number, because my scale number never dropped at all, but it's the best I've looked. And all of a sudden, right, this week, the scale, it started to come back down again. So we're not chasing scale numbers. We're chasing, again, the visual as well. Obviously, at some point, the scale weight, it's going to have to come down. It can't just stay the same on a full fat loss phase forever. There is going to be some drops, of course. But I just thought that's a great example, which has just happened to me over the last week, where the visual improved massively. So much leaner through the midsection, the obliques, even the glutes starting to come in a touch. But the scale weight stayed the same. That's why it's important to get your photos.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on the importance of consistency of your check-in photos, and without them, it's one of the first things that you look at probably as a coach yourself. I mean, I can look at somebody's picture and I already know the kind of week they've had before I even read what the check-in would say, as an example. Turning our attention to mistakes that people might make in the cut. We've spoken about, what we want to do is keep performance, and we want to keep every ounce of muscle, and that comes as well from our training. So we don't change the training up too much. So maybe we just have a little few minutes on what we do and what we don't do in respect to training.
Yeah, so when it comes to training on a cut, and I know you hold the same sentiment with this, and we have touched on it in the spaces that we were doing, like what training you were doing in an improvement phase or a building phase, that is the same training that is going to retain your muscle tissue. Think about it. This is not going to be a time to start doing all sorts of high rep sets, supersets, running around the gym like a blue ass fly, just doing crazy stuff. High reps shred you up, bro. That's the classic myth that you hear all the time, and it's fucking nonsense. The same training that built your muscle tissue is the exact same training that'll retain it. You're coming in, your hard, heavy sets, pushing with a good proximity to failure, accurate reps. The only thing that might change, it might not change out the gate. Maybe you have a little bit of a drop in your volume numbers. Maybe as you get towards the end, like you might pull a set or two off some of your big movements that are really, really fatiguing because you don't need the extra set. That is something that can change, but we're talking as you're getting towards maybe the end of a cut here. But for the most part, everything will stay the same, because it is the big message of what built your muscle tissue will retain it. And it really is as simple as that.
I mean, I totally agree, and I've experienced it as well. What builds the muscle, what gets you bigger is going to keep the muscle. We spoke about, maintaining that performance. We want to do that out the gate and also deep into the cut of how whatever the particular person in front of you is looking to do. But if we're already swimming in junk volume and eating into that recovery, because we're not going to be replenishing when we're in the deficit, you're not going to get the glycogen replenished. So there's not going to be that state. And as we mentioned, the more that we can do without needing to resort to like a deload week, for example, or refeeds when they're necessary. Refeeds when they're absolutely necessary. Again, that will come from the person in front of you. But if you're already swimming in junk volume right out the gate, you're creating, that people hate talking about it. It's the big elephant in the room, the fatigue monster. But in all honesty, it's a real thing. You can't keep adding. You can't just do sets. They serve no purpose anyway. You add in junk at that point. If we're being honest, you're not going to put on muscle tissue when you're in the deficit. You're fighting to keep every ounce of the muscle that you've built and shred the body fat, which will come mostly from your nutrition, of course, in the deficit, your cardio. But what you're doing in the gym is you're there. One of the things to have in your head is to fight for the muscle tissue, fight for your reps, and then see where you land.
Yeah, I like the analogy. Like you have to fight when you're in the gym. You have to fight for every set that you've got. Every set is an opportunity. So that's why we have to make every set count. If you're doing sets that are just, let's be honest, they're just unproductive junk, that's only taken away from your ability to recover. Now, we spoke at length about the stimulus recovery adaptation process. Even more important in a deficit, because you don't have the same ability to recover. You're on down tools. You are on lower food. You're in a decent deficit. You're chugging away at the body fat that you've got stored across the body. So your ability to recover is not the same as when you're in an improvement phase. So your training, it needs to line up with that, because the last thing we want to do is, with 3 or 4 weeks into a cut, we're having to deload already because you're doing too much volume. You're taking too many forced reps. You're doing too many sort of set extenders like drop sets and all this stuff. And that's another elephant in the room. People think, you're a pussy if you're not doing drop sets. Go hard or go home. And, we're the first people to say, we don't want to train like a fart or a fanny. We're not saying that. But you've got to line up your training with your ability to recover. And when you understand that, your fat loss phase is just going to go a lot smoother. You're going to be stringing productive weeks of training together, 12, 13, 14, 15 weeks of consistent, steady fat loss, maintaining good training performance. And that's what's going to make your cut ultimately go as best as it can, instead of trying to force through force reps and triple drop sets on a hack squat week 3 into a cut. It's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
So there's a good few things in there I wanted to touch on, like if you don't use it, you lose it. That's one of the things to keep in mind. What builds muscle keeps muscle, and that's two important things where you're fighting for those reps. Again, we're not saying go and grab the pink dumbbells and do 10 reps or whatever. Another good thing about having that sort of insight or foresight, if you want to call it that, is you're going to exit the cut arguably in a stronger place because you haven't lost much, if anything. One thing I probably would like to touch on, Francis, I think is a good thing. What we see with a lot of people, really common, legs and back, arms will probably stay in the realms. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to go in and do PBs every single workout. It doesn't mean that you don't fight for them and you give it your all to get and match the numbers in your book, but with good form. You're not just trying to get the numbers. But what happens is when you get to the end of the cut, you're a stone's throw, maybe with the exception of push, which is a good one. A lot of people do lose their push strength when they're in cuts. Maybe just sort of some things you've seen around that, Francis.
Yeah, so movements in terms of what are affected more by fat loss, I think, as you mentioned there, it's always push. It's something I always explain to clients because it's probably one of the first things to drop off. Now, what we've got to look at is that when we drop body fat, we lose internal stability. Body fat is stability for us, right? There's a reason you'll see some of the world's strongest men competitors or top powerlifters, they carry a little bit of extra body fat, not excessive, but a little bit of extra cushioning, and that's for good reason. Now, when we get leaner, we don't just pull body fat off from our midsection and our ass like everybody thinks. Look, you lose body fat from around your shoulders, your elbows, everywhere. So when you're doing presses, you're losing body fat now from, your arms, your shoulders, your chest. You've got less stability and less cushioning in the bottom of a press. Also, you're losing body fat from your upper back. Your upper back is your base of support. That's your base of stability. So you're pulling off body fat from all of these areas, which it makes your presses feel a little bit weaker. That's something I see with a lot of people. Don't panic when this happens. You're not going to maintain peak press and strength from week 1 of a cut into week 12, week 13. We try and fight as much as we can, but ultimately, there's going to be a couple of drops in reps here or there. You might even have to pull off a little bit of weight on some of your pressing movements, and it is just part of the game. So that is something to expect. What you don't want to do is start trying to fight tooth and nail to keep the same weight and same load on the bar and letting technique go to shit. It's so easy to do that. Someone's doing a bench press as an example, or before you know it, their head's coming forward like the chicken head reps, their ass is coming off the bench, they're using everything they can to leverage the weight. And then we're just taking tension off the chest. So you've got to know when, okay, leave the set there, and I need to take a little bit of weight off next time. So there's a fine balance. You've got to train hard enough, yes, but within the right capacity.
I mean, it can be a sucker punch to the ego, and it's just something that you need to accept. As we've touched on, you're not replacing the energy. Yes, you're drawing down on stored energy in terms of body fat, and that'll take you, a good way of the way. But having that, and we'll probably move on to that in a second about structuring how we would structure our food around our workouts and just for the rest of the day. I was just smiling because one of my clients, when they checked in this week, their feedback was, my arse must have shrunk a bit because I now fit on one of the seats in the gym. So
that's what you know.
A non-scale victory. So yeah, we'll go with that. So they're on a cut at the moment, so we could probably just link that into what we'd expect in terms of food coming down. We're going to keep protein high. We're going to have carbohydrates supporting the training. Probably take dietary fats around that so that we're not slowing down digestion, and it gives you some other food to keep you a bit more satiated, outside the workout perimeter. One of the things I did like from the spaces that we did, Francis, was someone said an improvement season is just a cut with more chicken and rice.
Yeah, it's true.
Similarly, for a cut, it's just the same, just a little less chicken and rice. Obviously, every meal isn't chicken and rice, but the it's a nice idea. I always thought that was quite funny, and it's very, very true. So what do you do structure wise and what you're looking for in terms of consistency?
Yeah, I think there is very, very a lot of similarities between how you approach things with a diet phase and your gaining phase with your food structure. Just to lead on from the last point with training, is that in a gaining phase or an improvement season, we're trying to get tension on the muscle tissue. That's what grows muscle tissue. That's what retains muscle tissue. It's the tension on the muscle tissue. So, if you drop a rep or you drop a little bit of weight, but if you're maintaining that tension on the muscle tissue, again, that ticks the box. You come in, you tick the box. Now, the food around the training allows you to come in to tick the box and get the stimulus and get the tension on the muscle. The biggest thing, the most important thing I would say when it comes to nutrition around your diet phases, you probably know what I'm going to say. It's the carbohydrate timing around that pre-workout perimeter. Absolutely important. I can't state the importance of this enough. What I recommend for a lot of people is for as long as you can, try and keep that pre-workout meal exactly the same as what you add in your improvement season or your gaining phase. Keep that the exact same in the diet phase. Protect that pre-workout meal at all costs. If you're going to pull carbs or calories away anywhere else, pull it from meals, post-training or further away from training. Just keep that pre-workout meal exactly the same. Protect that, because that's what's going to allow you to come in the gym, perform to the best possible capabilities that you can. Hard sets, maintaining all the tension on the muscle tissue that you want to tick the box to retain muscle tissue. So, yeah, you're keeping that the carb time or your carbs, again, higher on your pre-workout window. And if you are used to using intra-workouts, keep them in. Don't change that.
I think you've made a fantastic point there about keeping food steady. it maybe links a little bit to those like in the competing space, but similarly, in a cut when you're really being challenged potentially for how many calories that you can have, if you get yourself into a nice rhythm, yes, we want to pay attention. We talk about the macros so often. Yes, we want to pay attention to the micronutrients, so we're making sure that we're getting our veggies in, our salad and stuff like that. But one of the things we want to do is make sure we're having regular foods from whatever your list may be, because your body will get used to that. And also, you're giving yourself, in my opinion, less decisions to make of a day. Again, using myself as an example, I only really make one nutrition decision in a day. I already know what my first meal is going to be. Meal 2 and 3 takes care of itself. It's really my pre-workout as well. My yogurt before bed that I've had for 13 years just doesn't change. I enjoy it. I still enjoy it to this day. Yogurt. So, yeah, as I say, just that consistency around it. Things like digestion, all of that for when you're getting into training. You obviously want that to be in a nice spot. And I think that really helps, because then you find a way through the calories, a way to make it work for you. And the more, I don't want to say rigid, it is rigid, just being honest, it is a little bit rigid. But it's not rigid because you're stuck, you don't have choices to make. It's just about finding what of those choices work for you and then just sticking with them, because it'll make it so much easier for you.
I think coming off that point that you say there about the rigidness, I think the more consistent you can keep your meals and you eat similar things daily, you take away that decision fatigue, because that's the crux for so many people, is that they wake up and they don't know what they're going to eat for the day. It's an absolute fucking clusterfuck of what's going to go on. It's a free-for-all. Like, they haven't got food in the fridge, they haven't got things prepped, and that's where the mismanagement of calories and total macros and mealtime and around training, that's where it all goes out of whack. Training suffers, digestion suffers, recovery suffers, all because of a lack of organisation. But I think one of the big mistakes that I see, or I have seen people try and make, I don't know whether you've seen this one, someone goes into a diet phase and yes, they pull calories, but they then start to pull calories from the pre-workout meal and they save calories for the night, which is like, let's say 9 p.m. at night. They like to sit there and watch Netflix and they want to save as many calories for the night as possible. But then the pre-workout meal is suffered and performance suffers. So then you've got it ass backwards there. You're trying to save calories to sit on your ass at night and watch Netflix when you don't need the extra carbs then. You need your carbohydrates pre-training. So this is just a common mistake that people make and you don't want to make it. So I'm sure you've seen that before yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I've ended up pulling out for those types of scenarios is things like popcorns and as I call them, lifesavers. So if you're like a lifestyle type client, you might have a couple of snacks there sat to the side. We touch on the frozen berries again, something I personally love, and I know that you love them as well, Francis.
A classic.
Even on my own dieting phase, that's what I've been eating. I ordered 3 boxes of popcorn, small 14-gram bags. I think 30 grams of normal popcorn, and it fills a bowl, and it's minimal in terms of the calories. So one of the things I do like to do when I'm working with people is give them suggestions. Different people have different skill sets. There'll be people that are very fluent in macros and know how to manage and chop and change. Some people, I try and empower them and educate them to say, this is this, and you can swap that in and do all these kind of things. Because I think it's really difficult, like you alluded to there, when somebody gets like calories for the day and they get to the end of the day and they've got 100 grams of protein and 70 grams of fat left. What kind of meal can I make with that? And you're like, well, you need a better distribution across the day rather than you've eaten all your carbs, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fats, but you've got all of this left at the back end. So I like to make those suggestions and give it to people so that they can then see how to then structure that, as opposed to, sometimes if people haven't got the relevant enough experience, when you just throw numbers at them, it's like, how do I turn 2,200 calories into your 4 meals? We could say it's 40 grams of proteins, 40 grams of carbs. Again, it doesn't help some. Depending on what level someone is, that's fine, I can run with that. And then for some people, it's like, okay, I know what my options are and what I can change here and go with that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have a decent supply and steady structure of food throughout the day. You don't really want to have front loading all of your calories early in the morning for breakfast, and then before you know it, you go, shit, I've got 9 hours left and I've got 20 grams of carbs to play with. It's obviously, let's say someone's having 4 meals, you've got 2,200 calories to play with as the example. You'll bias the majority of your carbs in that pre-workout window, but you still want to save some good food for your 3 other meals, your protein feedings, a little bit of carbs in each, but just you scatter and bias the majority of your carbs in that pre-workout window. But yeah, the last thing you want to do is you don't want to leave yourself in too much of a hole, as you are getting towards the latter stages of a day, because that is where people can. They're ravenous hungry, they're going in the cupboard. So, there's a balance to it. It's not save all your calories for the night, but it's be mindful to spread it out as evenly as you can throughout the day, just to put yourself on something that you can be more adherent to, because that's key.
It's a great point you make about the protein feedings, because they become imperative where we're going. If we're not in muscle protein synthesis, we're in breakdown. A very oversimplified way of saying it. There is various different states. I'm not going to try and panic anyone, but if you think about it, like, you're either in breakdown or you're in synthesis. And what we want to do is avoid, especially when we're creating a negative energy balance, and there could be low energy availability depending on how far down the cut you are, how lean you are. So you really want to make sure that we're getting those protein feedings in. Again, as we've said, it's another extension of use it or lose it, because if you're not using the muscle tissue at that point in time by having positive nitrogen balance in your body from a nice protein hit, then you're, again, I'm not trying to scaremonger, but it's an important point to make, that you want to be regular with your protein feedings every probably 3 to 5 hours.
Yeah, it's like the anabolic switch. That's what I like to call the protein feedings. I think two of the best ways that we can switch on the anabolic switch is it's training. It's a training stimulus. We flip on the anabolic switch and your protein feedings throughout the day. That's how you're going to retain your muscle tissue. You're training, you're hitting a muscle group with enough frequency. You're hitting the anabolic switch, getting a stimulus, and then you've got your protein feedings throughout the day. And what do we always recommend? Anywhere from like 3 to 6 feedings of protein throughout the day. And that will genuinely depend on a person's lifestyle and what they can make work. But as long as you're getting that minimum 3, that's a minimum for me. I would never like to see anyone go below 3 meals a day. But if you're hitting that as a minimum, maximum 6, I think if you're in that 3 to 5, 3 to 6, you're gonna be spot on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not a huge fan of 1 meal a day. I think it's too much stress, especially if you're trying to get over 2,000 calories into 1 meal. You can argue that you're giving your GI a break to settle food, but then you're chucking 2,200 calories at it. People swear by it. I'm just not a fan, and I don't think it supports optimum. Got the word there.
Optimum.
Especially when what we're trying to do, we want people to come out of the diet phase with the hard work that they've put into improvement, still there. And, nothing's wasted. At the bottom line, there's no on or off. People might be a little bit more focused in the cut because they are a bit more focused on the meals. I know myself, and I actually just commented on this today. When you don't have a lot of calories to play with, you've got to be really focused on your nutrient-dense food, whole foods. I know myself at the moment, I'm having a salad before every meal. Today I missed it because I was having a little play with trying to peak my look, which meant I ate more carbohydrates, but they weren't satiating ones. And I've been really, really hungry as a result of that, because I didn't have my salad, didn't have my veggies. I didn't have my extra coffee in the afternoon because I was trying to protect kind of my stomach a little bit. So it just shows when you do take these things out, if you're not managing the satiety, then it's quickly going to kind of try and bite you, because hunger's there and hiding.
Yeah, the foods that are high on the satiety index, they're the staples of everyone. What I recommend for everyone's diet phase. So we've touched on the frozen berries, the absolute staple. Things like white potato, white potato and just berries in general. If you like oatmeal, these sorts of foods, very, very high on the satiety index. Now, what does that mean for, if you're not sure? Satiety, is basically how full a food keeps you. So if you eat something like a pack of Jaffa cakes versus a bowl of oatmeal, what's going to keep you fuller for longer? You're laughing, but those Jaffa cakes, they go down a street, mate. You can put a pack of 12 of those down and not even know you've had them. And, same with if you versus a big bowl of oatmeal, big 100-gram bowl of oats, it takes a little bit of time to eat as well. You'd always feel full after those. So that's the difference in satiety signaling. So yeah, we're basically telling you, don't be eating Jaffa cakes.
I mean, I mentioned the refeed that I started on Friday, and that was one of the first things I had, Francis, not the Jaffa cake. 100 grams of oats in the bowl. And at the moment, because my calories are fairly low, one of the things I have put to the side is oats. They were magic. Honestly, they were so good. They were so good. I've just got a quick question for you. How's your Spanish?
Spanish? It's getting better, mate. It's I'm not fluent in it. I understand everything that the missus and everyone says, but yeah, for me, like, I'm not fluent in it. Why?
But if you know this word, cardio. Never seen that meme.
Yeah. I've seen that. Yeah.
In all seriousness, cardio. I like it year round. I know that you're a fan of it as well. But one of the things, again, mistakes that people might make when they're coming into the cut, get calories as low as I can, get the carbs out, get the cardio to 3 hours a day.
Yeah, cardio, the classic. I think out of a lot of the things when it comes to fat loss, I think this is something that the average or general population they get wrong, and not just get wrong. I think they put too much stock in cardio without focus on the lifting side of things and the diet side of things. Now, I think when it comes to fat loss and retaining your muscle tissue, your lifting weights and your diet, like, they're going to be your two biggest levers. I think they are to retain your muscle tissue and performance. What happens inside the gym, on the gym floor, that's your priority. That will retain your muscle tissue. Your nutrition, again, very important for our protein feedings and your carbohydrate timing. Now, cardio, that's a lever that we can pull, but at no point do we want that cardio to interfere negatively with what happens with our training. That's the kicker. That's what people get wrong. They come out of the gate trying to do 3 hours of cardio, and then all of a sudden they're coming in and trying to train, and they're trying to do legs, and they've got hack squats or pendulums, and the legs are absolutely smoked because they've just done a load of cardio the day before, and they didn't need to do that. So what we say with cardio is just enough, again, that you can recover and still maintain your lifts and still train hard. And that's where the daily steps come in, everyone's favourite.
Won the power walk.
Won the power walk. Yeah, it's a classic.
No, I think you're absolutely right. We want to position cardio properly. It's a tool in itself, and as much as we said at the start, a lot of what we're going to do in the cut is about protecting performance as much as we can. If we just go all out, and I'm going to do this amount of cardio per week, coming from a lower end of the scale straight up, that you're going to quickly find that things are not going to respond like you want. Again, we spoke about we're not replenishing our glycogen stores. We're not having the energy that's there. And yes, understandably, we are trying to create a deficit through using different levers, and that is one of the levers that we want to pull on. But we certainly don't want to be, who wants to be spending hours upon hours in the gym anyway? And yes, we spoke about power walking, which we can obviously do outside. The reason I like a power walk is it gives you all the benefits of cardio, and for me, none of the drawbacks. Now, steps are good. You know, you can be out walking, you're still burning energy, you're still doing all the good stuff, you're outside in nature. But if you can get intensity into those steps when you can, you're going to put more energy out and you're going to get more basically bang for your buck. But the good thing about power walking is it doesn't take away from your recovery, from your training. You made a great point, Francis, getting into train legs. There's no point in getting into train legs when you absolutely burnt them on, you know, the Airdyne bike or something like that, or you so many rounds of skipping, and it's your leg day the next day. You know, again, what we're speaking about here is everything has its place, but you want to place it in the right place so that when you're going through the journey of your cut, that it's got a pathway, that's got structure to it.
A good question for you here with cardio, mate, and this is something that comes up a lot for me. I'm sure you get it as well. You know, like general population clients who they like to play football, they like to go and play five-a-side with the mates. A big one now, mates, like I always get this is paddle. Have you seen that one? That's the new one. That especially in America, that's the big wave. So, you know, how do you structure that in with someone? You know, someone is, as I say, it's general population client. They've got no interest in going to stage, nothing like that. Just want to get in better shape. You know, do you want to play five-a-side or 11-a-side once or twice a week, or do you want to go and play paddle with the mates? What recommendations are you giving around that with your structuring of your training?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of my gents recently who's just done a photo shoot. Actually, he plays soccer, and he gets training for, I say soccer, football, but he gets training and a match. So what we've had to do in discussions is sort of plan around times when he does have training. So it's a little bit more fatiguing on the legs versus obviously then him playing, for example, on a Saturday morning. So we just need to make sure that we've got that structure and we're doing leg sessions every so many days as opposed to just being whatever it would be like in the program. So if he needs another day of recovery, then that's absolutely fine, because again, as we're saying, there's no point in going in and half-arsing something or doing it to the point where you can't progress it. And by that, I mean, if he's already fatigued from the day before, you can't play a game on a Saturday, play 90 minutes, and then be expected to go in and do legs the very next day. So it's just about, you know, trying to work out where the happy medium is and where the schedule is. Now, again, if we're being honest, there's a difference there between a lifestyle client and a bodybuilding client, because you're maybe going to be wanting to do legs twice a week or every 3 or 4 days, 5 days at a push. But we just work within the confines and manage the expectations and say, this is what happens. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just explaining to someone this is what will happen. But we need to manage your performance. We need to manage your recovery a little bit, because football's great, paddle's great, social events, time with people, you get to meet your friends. Again, using myself as an example, I played five-a-side, and it was the only time that the boys from back at school used to meet up for a long time. So I totally understand. I've been through that experience where it's as I say, the 1 hour in the week that when everybody's got a family and multiple jobs and stuff like that, it's the only time that they can meet up. So we'd never take that away from someone. You know, we need to be encouraging and welcome that, because we're all about fitness, we're all about nutrition and stuff like that. But we're hurting people's mindset if we say to them, no, you can't go to your paddle or your soccer.
I think it goes through, you have to go through a needs versus wants analysis. That's what it comes down to. What is your main priority? If your main priority is to build the biggest legs possible, and you're very upfront with that, I'm probably going to tell someone, look, you probably need to give some of this football and paddle a miss. But if you're just someone wanting to get, you want to get in better shape, you're not really too bothered about building the biggest legs that you possibly can, well, fine, yeah. Paddle, football, great. The social elements of it. As long as you don't get injured. I've had a couple of those, mate. I've had a couple of people. That's one thing that we can touch on, is that, I'll give you a good example. A client I had a few months back, he went playing basketball. He jumps up to dunk, comes down, ruptured his patella tendon, and he's been out the gym for a couple of months because he doesn't play basketball regularly. He went and tried to do a big slam dunk or whatever, and he's put himself out. So that is something that you do need to be mindful of. I'm not trying to scaremonger with basketball, football, paddle, but these are things that you need to be mindful of. We don't move in these planes of motion and change direction at these speeds all the time. So when you're going from 0 to 100 doing that, again, these are just things you've got to be careful of. But yeah, we can blend it into a smart program, and you just what I would recommend is, especially with your leg training, with football and paddle, try and keep your leg training as far away from those sorts of sessions as you can, and then you just piece it together.
It's so valid, Francis, and I've had 3 gents that I know of. 2 of them I've coached over the years that popped their Achilles, going back to play football, but being 10, 12 kgs, not just all body fat, but just bigger people than when they left. And I'll be honest, I had a message from one of the gents I used to play 5-a-side with. He's like, "Oh, I should come back for a game." And I was so tempted. When I gave up football, I was, 11 stone, 154 pounds. I don't even know what that is in kilos, to be honest, mate. 64 kilos or something.
Yeah.
Right now, like in my sort of where I sit, I normally sit around the 200, 210 pounds mark, just like without kind of trying. Obviously, at the moment, I'm dieted, so I'm under 200, but you just don't move around the park. And 2 or 3 of the boys, as I said, just popped their Achilles because you say you're not moving, you're moving more weight, you're not in the patterns and stuff like that. I think it's a very, very good point to make. You know, people do need to make that decision whether the risk is worth the reward and stuff like that. But it's one thing to be mindful of, especially if it's been a long, long time. Another gent that I worked with basically tore his hamstring, and it was a very, very, very bad grade 2. Very bad. Like, this thing was black.
Yeah.
He couldn't train hamstrings for nearly 4 months.
That's what I mean. So it's that balance, isn't it? Like, we're not telling people not to, because going out and socialising and getting these different sources of cardio, and if that's going to keep someone on plan, again, what we always bring it back to: compliance is the science, something that someone can be adherent with. That's very, very important. But there is certain risk elements with certain types of cardio if you're not used to doing it. And again, you just have to be mindful of it, because I think this is what's happened with a lot of my clients, but you've probably seen it yourself, is that we're men, we're competitive. You get out on the football pitch, you start playing, 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, someone puts a little dribble past you, a little tackling on you, you're like, oof, I'll show you. And then you think that you're 16 years younger, and before you know it, your Achilles has popped. So, that's what you've got to be careful of, because we're all human.
That was one of the reasons I actually gave up 5-a-sides. I was 34, I think, 35 maybe. It was early in my training. So, and I played against a young boy, and he was 18, and he was very, very good. He played here in Scotland at the division, I think it was Division 1 or 2, so not the top, not the one under, but just one under that. So there's a good chance when he can make it. And even at that level, I used to try and chase him about because he was really fit. And for me, when I was playing, I just used to love running about. I wasn't the best player in the world. I wasn't bad, but I wasn't the best. But I loved a runabout, and I would run about for an hour. And exactly as you said there, mate, he skinned me. And I knew his move. I knew what he was going to do. And I went to tackle him, and I stood on his leg. And immediately, I put my leg back, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I really didn't mean it, honestly. And he's like, it's fine. And that way, like, you replay it and you think, I could have broken that boy's leg. And actually, that was one of the reasons I kind of stepped back from it, because I was like, maybe just getting a bit too, because this still worked, but the legs aren't as quick.
Yeah, that's it, mate. That's what I've seen with a lot of people. So that's where, our good, we don't have to worry about that with our daily steps or our power walks. We just get in our own head and we just bounce around, get our steps.
It's the good thing about the gym. I think it's got one of the lowest injury rates going. When we're talking about people in the cut, just thinking of some of the challenges that come across the way, and something I've had very recently was 3 different clients with digestion issues, and they can be very, very different things. one, I kind of guessed, and I was like, have you increased your caffeine intake? And are you eating a bit more, maybe fiber than you used to? And he's like, yes, on both. I was like, okay, let's drop the caffeine out a little bit, keep the rest in for this week, but let's reduce your caffeine and your fizzy drink intake. And lo and behold, a couple of days later, he's like, that's what it was, and that's exactly what I've done. I was like, well, there you go. You know, that's the trigger. Another gent just had a kind of like a viral infection. He knew himself that something was wrong. And we just said, let's ride it out. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll see what happened. And then the third gent was just, I've been working with him for a while. And it was just a case of nothing had really changed. And it was just one of those kind of isolated events that sort of sorted itself after, 24 hours. He said he kind of felt better and stuff like that, but he'd been struggling with it all week. So we didn't know if it was maybe the remnants, maybe something trying to work on him. So I don't know if you've got anything like that in the cut that you see or you've seen recently.
Yeah, well, I think it's everyone's go-to, isn't it? Like, they're getting hungry and the diet drinks, they come out, they're a classic, mate. You've got to be able to tolerate them. That's the thing. Some people, I know myself, if I start going past more than maybe 1 or 2 cans a day, I can start farting my ass off, and I don't want that. So as good as they can be, I think everyone's got a sort of tolerance and a limit. I know you said yourself you can handle 5 or 6 a day, no problem. If someone can do that, like, fair play. I know I can't. I know there's a lot of other people who have to be careful with that. The other one, which goes under the radar, and I've had this happen to me as well, is chewing gum. If you have too much chewing gum, you're swallowing in the air as well. That's another thing that people start to bring in when they're getting hungry. All of a sudden, you might have just been having, 1 to 2 pieces of chewing gum a day, just normal, and all of a sudden, hunger kicks in, and they're going through a pack of 10 to 12 extra or Trident a day, and all of a sudden, can't stop farting. I've had that in the past because I was getting hungry, and then those orange Tridents, they've got no calories in, but you think, ooh, I'll have one of those. 1 turns into 2, turns into 3 before you know it. You're sucking on air. Digestion doesn't like it because a lot of the sugar alcohol's in it as well. So it's just things to be mindful of as you are getting deeper into a deficit, and that hunger is starting to drive up.
The other thing is as well, different people have different reactions to things, and some people, when they eat chewing gum, it's obviously stimulating like the body feeding, and it can arguably make some people hungrier. You're using it as to try and stop the hunger, but what it's actually doing is your body doesn't know that you've got a piece of chewing gum, for example, in your mouth, and you're chewing it. So you've got the saliva, amylase. Your body's like, oh, this is good. A meal coming. Fire up all the digestive juices. Let's go, and we'll start a meal from there. I'm not saying that that's going to be everyone. There's going to be different reactions to it. Some people will be in the middle where it doesn't really affect them, but it's just worth noting that there'll be different effects for different people.
I think the other point as well about fibre intake coming up, if someone increases the fibre intake, if you've had a big spike in fibre intake, I think that's why it's important. And I do like to see people have consistent meals and consistent diet plan across the board, because you're not going to be having these excessive spikes in fibre if you're eating similar things daily. Because once you eat similar things daily and you know what works for you, you've got the box ticked then. If you're having that variability or excessive variability, and then all of a sudden you're adding in 30 grams of fibre on top of what you have been eating, and your stomach doesn't like it, you're not used to doing that. So that's why. So that's why it comes back to just trying to get a sort of consistent meal plan and stick with similar meals, similar fibre intake, all that good stuff, just so you're not running into all of these sort of digestive issues.
I'm just mindful of what we're coming up on. So what I just wanted to turn to was, we've had a successful cut. Let's just say everything's gone well. What's the marker, would you say then? What do you look for, to end the cut and then say, right, it's time to get back growing again?
I think it's always going to be individual, isn't it? It's always going to be like is a person looking for a photo shoot? Are they going to stage? Because we know, like, getting beach lean, photo shoot lean, stage lean, they're all different. They're all different stages of leanness. So initially, for an end point of a cut, it all depends, where you're trying to get to. But let's say, the average sort of lifestyle client, and we've touched on this before, that not many people are going to really need to dip below that sort of 10%, 11% body fat. Once you start getting there, once you start dipping below that, the juice isn't worth the squeeze for a lot of people, unless you are trying to go for a photo shoot, or you are going stage lean, which again, that's another process in itself. That's just a different beast. But most people are going to get all the benefits of a good cut, look happy on the beach, be healthy where they're at, good set of abs coming through, and they're going to be in that 10 to 12% body fat. So once you start getting to around there, then it's time to reverse it out. I'm sure we've had that conversation, haven't we, around 10% body fat. People don't really need to get below that unless you're going to go for a photo shoot or stage.
Yeah, I mean, you've absolutely nailed it. The juice just isn't worth the squeeze, and I'm talking here from experience. Don't get me wrong. It's if somebody wants to explore it and just to see what it's like. I'm working with a client at the moment who wants to be absolutely shredded, as his terms, like he is going to the stage, but he's got no, as it stands, intent of actually going up and doing it. I've explained when I spoke to him, we had a call, and I just said, listen, I just want to explain where you're going to go here, what's going to happen, especially towards the end for, I don't want to say, it's just pushing for a few weeks that probably, but it's also character building. Yeah. So I'm kind of, I'm presenting both sides of it there. You're absolutely right. For most, it's just not worth it. But as well, it's like, how much can you actually take? Because one of the things that come from it when people have expressed to me in the past that they maybe want to compete, some people will love it and they'll want to do it again. Some people will absolutely hate it and they'll never want to do it again. And well, how do you find out?
There's only one way to find out, and it's putting yourself through the ringer, isn't it? But I think we've said before as well that I think most people look the best probably around 10 to 12% body fat. I know I do. I look and feel great around that range. Once it's when you start dipping below that, yeah, you can say maybe photo shoot leanness, that 7-8%. Yeah, you look good, but like that stage look, it's good for a certain day. You look like a bag of bones. You're going around with a big skeleton face, and for most people, for what they're after, it's in. For most people, for what they're after, mate, they're made up around that sort of 10 to 12% body fat. And you get all the benefits of a good cut without any of the negative side effects.
I keep forgetting at points that it's also audio, because we're doing it and we can see each other.
Yeah.
The audio, I just point to my own face there when Francis was talking about faces.
I know. Even mine's coming in.
If we just wind it up, then we maybe like exiting the cup for a couple of minutes, and we can just talk about, how we'd reverse our calories gradually. We probably, to be honest, need cutting part 2, and maybe we'll come back to that with a deeper dive. I think it's been great what we've covered, but we can talk about reversing calories gradually, what to do so that you're not going. We know that the body's primed when you're lean to be not lean because it doesn't want to be. You're fighting all the the natural natural effects of the body that's been shaped and honed over many thousands, millions of years. It doesn't want to be muscular. It wants to keep body fat so that it can preserve you through famine, which we've obviously seen through different places in life. So we're looking to stabilize our body weight for a point, get back to maintenance calories, or what's the next phase, which is generally go back into a growing phase. So I don't know if you want to do a minute or two on that, Francis, and then.
Yeah, so when you finish a cut, the cut's over. So what this used to be something in the industry a few years ago. It was called reverse dieting, where you'd be on X amount of calories at the end of your cut, and then you bump up like 100 calories or 150 calories every week for maybe like 4, 5, 6 weeks until you got to maintenance calories. Now that's since been sort of debunked. People don't really follow that anymore. Just because if the cut's over, doing that is a waste of time. Just get right back to maintenance. Start the recovery process. Go take your deficit calories wherever you've been and get yourself to around maintenance and hold there steady. Hold for a couple of weeks. Get everything back up to baseline. get some extra carbs in you, start recovering a bit better, and spend a good few weeks around that maintenance calories. Whether that be 2, 3, 4 weeks, it will depend on the individual. But get right to maintenance, let everything settle around there, get some good productive training, good recovery, let your body weight settle around that maintenance for a couple of weeks. And then that's when you probably start, from that maintenance phase, that's when you probably start layering in, okay, let's layer in 100, 150 calories. From that point, assess after a couple of weeks, get the all clear, we're happy with the visuals, we're happy with what we're seeing, okay, maybe a touch more. And you just go like that until you find your rate of surplus where you want to be. But yeah, when you finish the cut, don't be messing around, get right to maintenance and let everything settle.
Yeah, normally what I try and advise is, somebody on the day of, if it's maybe like, for example, using a photo shoot as an example, go out that night and have something that you enjoy, and then maybe have a breakfast the next morning that maybe you've been looking forward to or something like that. But then the plan's there in place. If you can get straight back to the plan with the increased calories, because you're absolutely right, what's the point in extending a cut? The cut's done, or should be. You've completed what you set out to achieve. There's no point in doing another 4-6 weeks, because it's just an extended cut. Okay, they called it reverse dieting. It's an extended cut is what it was. But one of the most important things, and we touched on it at the start, when you're heading back to maintenance or you're going into your improvement phase, it's just more chicken and rice. So, and that's important, because those foundations that you've laid in your improvement phase prior to your cut, which you'll have really honed in if you've done it right, because when your calories are low, you're looking at nutrient-dense foods and satiety, because, who wants to eat a portion of chips and have a protein shake and be hungry for the rest of the day because you blew your, 1,800, 2,000 calories on that? That's not going to work. So what you want to do is get yourself out there. And also, if you do that, the more that you can stick to, what's on the plan or those types of foods, the longer the runway you're giving yourself when you hit the improvement phase, because you're not going from, let's say, 8, 10, 12% body fat to like 15, 16, 17 within a week, 2 weeks, because you can't put down the Jaffa cakes, so I think it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I think that probably leads us into the segue for next week's episode, isn't it? Where we're going to talk on the improvement phase. So we could go on now for an hour or two about the improvement phase, but we'll probably save that for next week, won't we? But I enjoyed that again, mate. That was spot on.
We even did half an hour before we hit the record button.
Yeah, we have to start recording that for everyone. Yeah, there's just loads of golden nuggets that just keep coming out. We're going to keep bringing these out every week, every Monday. Thanks for all the support, everyone. I'm looking forward to keep bringing them to you.
100%. So episode 3, cutting, train, eat, think. Thank you, Francis, as always.
Nice one, mate. See you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.